So did you know that there are companies out there that buy up casks of your favourite whiskey, put it in their warehouses, stick it in a bottle and slap their name on the front of it? Welcome back, Dram Fam, to the Whisky Diary. We are, of course, talking about independent bottlers. Now, what exactly is an independent bottler? I guess the most succinct definition is someone that buys other people's whiskey and independently bottles it. So yeah, the majority of independent bottlers don't make their own whiskey. The majority of them are buying casks from other distilleries and then putting it in their own warehouses, and they're looking after that whiskey, and it's up to them to decide when it's ready. And then when it is, they put it in bottles themselves, stick their label on it. Sometimes they display the original distillery, sometimes they don't. And they sell it under their own brand. There is a slight exception to this, which is a practice known as teaspooning, where you buy a cask of someone's whiskey, you then put a teaspoon of somebody else's whiskey in it, technically making it a blend, and then you are exempt from having to put the name of the distillery on the front of it. I actually don't know a lot of the legality around teaspooning, but get subscribed because I'm going to learn and then I'm going to tell you. So a brief history of independent bottling in at least the Scotch whisky industry. So back in the day, the majority of distilleries were producing whiskey to go into blends. Once again, a distillery is fundamentally an alcohol factory. And still to this day, some of the biggest selling whiskies in the world are blends. Well, that was a lot more so, sort of back in the day. And so independent bottlers were buying casks of whiskey directly from distilleries. Again, just alcohol factories. And putting them into their own blends, their own whiskies, and in some cases selling them as single malts. One of the oldest examples of this is W.M. Cadenhead's, which is one of the oldest independent bottlers. In fact, I think it's the oldest independent bottler in Scotland, which were founded in Aberdeenshire in 1842. So this has been going on for a very long time. So why do independent bottlers exist? Well, for distilleries, it's a fantastic way of shipping spirit before it's ready to get an ROI on, or your return on investment on what you're producing. So a distillery can't sell Scotch whisky, and we are talking about the Scotch whisky industry here, by SWA regulations until it's 3 years old. So a lot of these independent bottlers can pick up new make, buy the cask and put it into their own bonded warehouses and age it until they feel it's ready. They can also put it into different casks. So once it's left that distillery, an independent bottler can fundamentally do whatever they want with it. Another great opportunity for these independent bottlers is they don't have a brand per se. A lot of distilleries become synonymous with certain styles and whatever else. Well, independent bottlers don't have that. They can do whatever they want. Functionally, it's just spirit. Whoever manufactured it in the first place is fundamentally, in most cases, irrelevant. They can do whatever they feel lends itself best to the spirit. And they have no sort of historic legacy, really, to worry about with regards to what people expect from that brand of spirit. Personally, I'm an enormous fan of independent bottling. I think it opens so many doors to try so many different expressions of whiskies that you know. For me, I'm an explorative whiskey drinker. I like trying everything. I'm always up for giving something a go. There are lots of distilleries which produce whiskies that I love. And it's always that, I just wish that was bottled at cask strength. I wish that had spent a little bit longer in a sherry cask. Independent bottlers give you that. I think the overarching reason that a lot of people go to independent bottlers is that they don't have a reputation that the same as the distillery do. As I've said before, a lot of people, when they buy a certain whiskey, they expect certain characteristics of that whiskey. Well, independent bottlers don't have that constraint. As a result, it gives them a lot more flexibility to play with things like different wood finishes, different cask maturations, different ABVs, and aging it for different amounts of time in different styles of cask. For instance, where is it? Where have I put it? Oh yeah, it's here. This is a 13-year-old Bunnahabhain from the old malt cask. Now, this is actually one of 40 bottles that came out of a firkin. Now, a firkin is a 40-litre cask instead of, the majority of casks are hogsheads and butts. You're talking about the 250-litre range. Get subscribed, because I've got a whole bunch of episodes planned specifically around the different casks types and, what it actually means when you put certain whiskies in certain casks. But anyway, smaller casks just fundamentally rapidly accelerate the maturation process. A whiskey that spent 10 years in a 200-litre cask is going to taste a lot younger than a whiskey that spent 10 years in a 50-litre cask. So, this 13-year-old Bunnahabhain has come out of a 40-litre cask. There's only 40 bottles of this that exist. And it is absolutely incredible. It's like the biggest, juiciest, richest Bunnahabhain you've ever tasted in your life. One of the other massive selling points for me is just the range of whiskies you can get from various different price points. Some of the cheapest whiskies I've got are from independent bottlers, but they've still got the kind of things that we look for, that 46 and above ABV, non-chill filtered, all natural colour. Even from distilleries, which historically don't really adhere to those kind of statistics. What we've seen recently as well is a lot of these independent bottlers are starting to branch out of whiskey, and they're releasing gins, rums and tequilas. Those casks are just being reused. We're getting a ton of experimentation right now, not just from the distilleries, but out of all that experimentation that the distilleries are doing, we're getting more of that from these independent bottlers. Honestly, I've said it before and I'll say it again, we're incredibly lucky right now. We have got such an enormous kind of renaissance of cool experimentation coming from whiskies. Fun fact, some of the first people to ever put, Scotch whiskey into those alternative maturations of like sherry and port and Madeira and stuff were independent bottlers. So we kind of got them to thank for some of our favourite expressions of whiskies that we drink now. But anyway, I thought I'd dip through some. These are just a handful that I grabbed off the shelf, and this is not indicative of better quality or anything else. This is just some of the whiskies I grabbed that I really, really enjoy. So probably one of the most fun ones, which I'm really, really excited to do a review on actually, because I think it's fantastic, is the Gauldrons, which I believe is the name given to a bunch of caves in some cliffs just off the Campbelltown coast. So this is a Campbelltown blended Scotch malt whiskey. So this is a blended whiskey from a bunch of different Campbelltown distilleries. This is actually what I'm going to drink while I go through the rest of them, because this is incredible. This is a blended Scotch whiskey. Again, we're bottled up at 46.2%, and it's all Campbelltown whiskies. And I've got to say, it's an incredible, incredible whiskey. It's got big Campbelltown vibes, man. But anyway, while I'm sipping down this. This is a 10-year-old Clynelish. I mean, this is a single cask. It's still got bits floating in it. You'll quite often find a lot of distilleries don't release their own single cask releases. It's just not something that they would do. They've got to keep up with the demand for their core ranges. Again, independent bottlers. This is a 10-year-old single cask Clynelish. Bottle number 91 of 145. This was actually a recommendation from someone in one of the comments on one of my channels. This is incredible. This is just the Clynelish 14, which I'm a big fan of, amped up to 11. This is a stunning whiskey. 58.8 as well. This is just not something that you're going to be finding from Clynelish. Obviously, as I said, the old malt cask, 13-year-old Bunnahabhain. Again, this is an exceptional whiskey. It definitely wasn't cheap. Again, you know, just because it's independently bottled doesn't mean it's cheap. But to find a 13-year-old single cask Bunnahabhain, one of 40 bottles ever made from a Firkin cask, that's going to cost you a hell of a lot more if that's coming directly from Bunnahabhain. Another really interesting independent bottler are the Good Spirits Company. So I actually picked this one up from the Glasgow store. They're no different to any other independent bottler. They are buying this. So this is a Teenanic. This is a Teenanic 10-year-old. Again, this is a distillery where an awful lot of their whiskey goes into blends. Bottled up at 57.9, 10 years old. I believe it's a single cask. 286 bottles would indicate that would be a single cask. Incredibly light, incredibly floral. Really, really easy drinking, even up at 57.9%. Good Spirits Company are, if you're ever in Glasgow, a store I highly recommend that you pop into just to see what they've got on the shelves. They've always got something weird and they've always got something crazy interesting. Next we have Single Cask Nation. So this is a Port Dundas. They are a Glasgow grain distillery. So this is a 20-year-old single grain. I actually had not heard an awful lot about these guys until the Glasgow Whisky Festival a couple of weekends ago, and I tried a couple of their whiskies, and holy hell, man, they are incredible. Talk about 20-year-old single cask whiskies. As I say, this is a single grain, but you're talking, it's 20 years old, first fill bourbon barrel. You've got your cask number on here, distilled in October 2000, bottled in July 2021, one of 188 bottles. Don't think I paid anything more than about £50-60 for this, for something that's 20 years old, single cask. That is incredible value for money, in my opinion. You've probably all had enough of me talking about this now. So this is actually bottled by Atom Labs, which are the parent company of Master of Malt, which, you know, is my preferred retailer online. Bottled at 58%. It is so this is another prime example of an independent bottler that don't name the distillery from which this spirit came. So we have no idea what it is. I have my suspicions. I will keep them to myself. I've actually reviewed this on the channel before, which I'll link down in the description below. This is stunning. This was £36. Like, I don't know how many other, you know, age statement. Right, it is only 8 years old, but I'd love to know what else is in it, to what it's been vatted with, because that is not the colour of an 8-year-old whiskey. This is stunning, incredible value for money, and I don't think it's that kind of value that you're going to get outside of independent bottling, in my opinion. This is really, really interesting. This I happened across randomly on the internet. Says a thing with Highland Park. Highland Park do not allow independent bottlers to put the name of the distillery, to put Highland Park on the bottle. So if you ever buy a Highland Park, a Highland Park independent bottling, it won't say that it's Highland Park on it. So this one's from Douglas McGibbon, Clondalkin, never heard of it, just looked damn interesting, 13-year-old, matured in a refill hogshead, bottled up at 62.2%. And the only hint that we have here is it says, distilled at probably Orkney's finest distillery. And it doesn't take much Googling to know there's only 2 distilleries on Orkney. One of them is Scapa, and I don't think it's Scapa, personally. This was a steal on Master of Malt. Again, I think this was around £40 or so for a 62% 13-year-old. I mean, limited run as well. You're talking 371 bottles. Could be a vatting of 2 different casks. Could just be one. Oh, it even says on the bottle, single cask. Stunning whiskey, very reasonably priced. Spoke very briefly about WM Cadenheads earlier. The oldest independent bottler in Scotch whisky. and their shops are a treasure trove, an Aladdin's cave of incredible whiskies. A lot of them aren't cheap, but I think Cadden Heads, they're definitely going for more of the quality, rarity and one-off aspect. I very rarely see things in Cadden Heads that you're seeing in any other independent bottlers. Not to say they don't exist, but every time I've gone into the Cadden Heads shop, holy hell man, you're finding some wild stuff in there. This I actually tried at a tasting at Shock Surprise, the pot still in Glasgow. I loved this so much. I pretty much drove immediately the next day, not like immediately from the pot still, to go and buy it from the shop in Edinburgh. And I live over in Glasgow, so that's like a well over an hour, 2.5 hour round trip total. This is a 29-year-old Cameron Bridge single grain, bottled at 57.8. I've made a good dent in this, and I'm a little bit worried because I don't think I'm ever going to get this again. This is hands down one of the most delicious whiskies I've ever tasted, and it's a single grain. In fact, this was the whiskey that changed my mind from... I never used to be a fan of single grain. Didn't have a taste for it, didn't really like it that much. I was definitely more of a single malt person till I tried this. This changed my mind. This is stunning. This was bottled in... This was distilled in 1989. That's crazy to me. And yeah, I paid £90 for that bottle, which is insane value. Finally, probably one of the most well-known independent bottlers, which are just a little bit more than an independent bottler, the Scotch Malt Whisky Society. A number of you have probably noticed I have a handful of SMWS bottles back there. These are very interesting. So I plan on doing an entire video about Scotch Malt Whisky Society in the future, in fact very soon. I am a member, I pay for my membership. I'm a big fan. I mean, I know not everyone is a huge fan of them for their own varying reasons, but for me personally, I don't think there are many organisations that bottle quite as many whiskies as these guys do. Every single one is a single cask strength whiskey. They have an interesting colour-coded guide. So this one's a pink. I think that means light and sweet, sweet and fruity, something like that. Bottled up at 60.1. It's always got the distillation date, the region, the cask, and they have a code on the bottle. So while it doesn't print directly what the distillery is, it does have a code, and you can very readily look that up. Honestly, some of my favourite single cask whiskies I found through the Scotch Malt Whisky Society. And, you know, they're another one of those guys which are quite happy to experiment. If you're ever in Glasgow, I think it's Tuesdays, but do check online. They do, you know, non-members days. You do have to be a member to go in their bars. They have a number of bars across the world. They've got one in Edinburgh. They've got one in Glasgow, but their head office is actually in Edinburgh. So I can't remember. The Vaults are in Edinburgh, and I've been and I love it. To be honest, I've had nothing but hugely positive experiences with both their whiskey and them as a whole. In fact, the Bath Street Bar is honestly one of my favourite places to go in Glasgow. The food's exceptional as well. But anyway, I want to stop talking about this now. I love independent bottlers, and I highly encourage people, whenever you get a chance, go and explore them, man. Like, go and explore and see what other whiskies you can find. So yeah, let me know down in the comments if you have found any of your favourite whiskies that, you know, being sold by independent bottlers, and what you think of them. But anyway, that's enough from me. Thank you all very much for watching. If you've liked this video or you found it useful, please do drop a like. And if you'd like to support the channel, please do consider subscribing. For those of you that are subscribed, you can hit the bell icon to be notified whenever I upload. And on that note, Slàinte mhath.